Hello, from Will at www.modelrailwayreviews.com. Today we're looking at how to weather your trucks and make them blend in realistically with their background. I've recently bought these two ready-to-run trucks at a model show, but I want to make them blend in with the rest of the trucks that have already been weathered and look far more realistic than the plain, pristine finish of these trucks. So, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step guide as to how to weather your trucks. So, I've now taken the trucks inside and it's time to start weathering them. First of all, make sure that all the dust that might have gathered on them over the years is blown out, like the stuff in there. A quick blow should clear it, so that the paint isn't interfered with by the dust. Now, first things first, let's pick out some of the detail on these trucks. Detail first, and you take a reasonably fine nib brush, wash it in your water, spizz it out, make sure it's not too wet, just damp, and take some of your paint and just pick out all the bits you think where the metal would be exposed with the metal type. So I'm doing the coupling here that would be damaged over time. Originally painted black, but the amount of times it was coupled up would have been not silver. Some models you can do the buffer beams as well, again through periodic damage, and generally just pick out areas where you think the metal will be exposed and you'll be able to see it. So again, this little box on the side. Not much to do with the truck except the coupling, often worth doing the coupling, and possibly the buffer beams as well, just light knocking damage. So with the details done, spill your brush, and a useful tip is to get the brush in the crease of your hand, close your hand through that crease and spin the brush as you pull it. That turns the nib back into a fine point. See there, pointing to the fish, and then you can put the guard back on if you have one, just to protect it. So that's how to look after your brushes too. So with the details done, we'll go on to the actual weathering of these trucks. So first of all, take an old brush with a non-pointed end, pretty rough. Quick swizz of water. You can dry off that on your hand until it's very, very slightly damp. And take a little bit on the end of your brush. We'll use the truck first, and generally this can go over most areas, really, in varying quantities. Try and spread it about as much as you can. So just dab up the side there, especially around these frames where the dirt will gather. And generally it is beginning to improve it a bit, toning down the white areas which are a bit too stark, very roughly with the last bit of the paint on your brush. Go over the other areas, and if it's too much with the semi-permanent ones, you can get your finger or a tissue if you don't want to and wipe it off. Having done that, I like to move on to the mud colour. Slightly lighter and more brown than the grime. Of course, remember, you can do this with any sort of paint really, as long as you're confident enough if it doesn't come off. Same sort of style, and generally just go over bits where you think mud itself would gather in brown colours, so especially low down on the frame, and probably not as high up, so you're looking at lower frame with mud. While that mud's still wet, I take the dirt and get a light layer on the brush. Again, you don't need to get the brush wet between these unless the brush dries itself. And generally with the dirt I try and lighten up the lower areas of the trucks. So I'll just leave that to dry now. So I'll wash my brush and leave that for a good 10 minutes or so. So what I do is I take the grime again, and with the dry brush you take a big dollop of the grime from the lid, you dip it in the water quite heavily so it doesn't drip, but it's quite wet, and on the roof you swill that all over. And that's basically just a mess, a dappled mess on there. At the moment, as I said, it looks pretty ridiculous, but it'll have to take a while to dry because it's so wet, but it will look good after that. So, after a short wait for that paint to dry, we're now back and time to put on the final touch, which is rust. So, we take our orange coloured paint. Now there can be all sorts of shades that are good for rust. It comes in many shades in real life. We take a small amount, easy to see on the end of the brush. Again, a rough brush is best for this. And the most likely place you'll find rust, in my mind, is around the bogies. Now when you first put it on, it looks a bit stark against the rest of your weathering. We'll get into that in a moment. So, I do it on the bogies, occasionally on some of the moving brake parts. Again, I don't know if this is exactly what it would be in real life. Maybe a bit on the body, rusted through. You can do it on the buffer beam as well, maybe around the coupling, that sort of area. Now, some people might like that, but I find that maybe a tad too stark, so I might use a bit of brown or mud to tone it down just a bit. Just a bit there. Take that down just a notch. There. Very slightly. You can wash the brush, and while it's still wet, and give it a bit of a dab with a tissue just to get off some excess. And there we are. And that looks a bit better, a bit more realistic. Done the brake van as well, so that's all done. Same sort of way, exactly. And that's how the roof turns out, mottled. Maybe a bit of patchiness around here. Remember, you can do patchiness instead of wiping on these areas to make them look sort of a motion like this with the brush over those areas, just to make them look a bit more patchy, a bit more realistic. So, there are two trucks. So, with the two trucks on completion, it's now time to look at some of the other weathering jobs that I've done. So, that's all from me, Will, at www.modelrailwayreviews.com on the realism features. Next time I hope to be showing you the locomotive detailing and how to do it yourself. So, thanks very much for watching this. Bye now.